I remember going to the first clinic and them taking blood. And for some reason, the phlebotomist couldn't get blood from
Hmm.
me. And so I think I got stabbed 5 or 6 times and I ended up with bruises on both my arms. So until infertility isn't something anybody talks about, right? It's kind of hush hush because I've been told my whole life this is what you do. So then now I'm not able to do those things. I'm already kind of an anomaly. I got married at 35 and told all sorts of things before I got married, like, "Oh, if you have enough faith, this will happen," or, all of these like,
So did you start to doubt your faith, like your good enoughness in your faith or any of that as a part of this? Like, I'm screwing up. I'm the problem, not only physically but also spiritually. Does that feel like it?
Welcome to the Feminine Alchemy podcast, where we explore the truth about the feminine, the peaceful, the wild, and the visceral. I'm your host, Jaye Anne Berenger, joined by my co-hosts, Julie Dean Richards and Kaylee Rose. Each week, we explore the deep mysteries of the feminine and help listeners apply them to their daily lives in a practical way. Join us to unlock the hidden wisdoms your soul has been waiting for.
Hello and welcome to another episode of Feminine Alchemy. I'm Jaye Anne Berenger, your host, and I am interviewing a very special guest today. We have Candice on, and Candice is going to talk to us about infertility, which is something that I think a lot of women deal with, mostly silently and full of anguish. So I'm so grateful Candice Prescott is here to come forward and fully describe her experience and her journey. But first, I'm going to tell you a little bit about Candice, just so you have some background. Candice Prescott grew up in Utah. She is certified in foot zoning and astrology. She offers varying modalities in her practice, such as foot zoning, face zoning, astrology readings, and energy coaching. Candice has a background in school counseling and a master's degree in clinical counseling. She's been married for 10 years and has a beautiful miracle daughter. Candice still has not birthed any children of her own and recognizes infertility as an ongoing journey. Welcome, Candice. Thank you for being here.
"Thank you. I'm so excited to be here and do this."
Yes, it's so wonderful to connect with you. So, just to kind of give our audience a background, just like an origin story, a big understanding, the first question I have for you is what's your sun, moon, and rising sign?
My sun sign is Libra. I'm an Aries moon and rising is Pisces.
How do you feel like you relate to that? What does that mean to you? And what does that look like for your life when you've connected with that?
I loved learning that about myself. I've always been kind of interested in astrology, like on the I guess teenage view of that. Like my friends in high school, we'd always look at the horoscopes and I would laugh and think they were funny. But I always thought there was I don't know, I've always been kind of drawn to that. And then learning more about not just my sun sign, but mostly the moon and the rising is what I think I've connected to the very most. Mostly, I think, because the sun sign I've known my whole life. I'm a Libra. This is kind of what it looks like. Not really like, not as much depth throughout my life. But then with the moon sign, I'm like, oh, that's why I'm so fiery. I've always known I've had like this internal fire in me. So when I learned about that, it was a fire sign. I'm like, oh, that explains why it feels like it's this internal fire that's just burning all the time. And so it's been fun to connect with that in that way. The Pisces too, however, at first when I was learning about astrology, I didn't know my exact time. And so it was Aquarius. And I thought, well, that kind of fits. I'm a little bit humanitarian-ish. But then when I learned about the Pisces, I was like, okay, that makes it 100% why. I grew up in a home that had a lot of conflict in it. And that energy there really, really impacted me. And not in like the adults in the house didn't necessarily realize that it was impacting me that much because I would kind of hide and shelter from it. I stayed out of the way. I stayed quiet, that kind of thing. And then learning about that, I realized that's why I could feel stuff all the time, but I couldn't put my words to it. I would have a hard time when I was going through counseling school. I had a professor that would say, "You are such an iceberg. You have all this stuff underneath. you need to talk, you need to say it, you need to put it into words. And so even then with learning the Pisces stuff, I'm like, oh, that is why like I'm absorbing all this stuff or feeling and leaning into all of these things. And I could perceive it subconsciously, but I couldn't always put it into words what was going on. And so it's been fun to learn about me and why or how those things are happening.
That's exactly why I love astrology because it gives us more definition around different parts of us that we're like, wait, but I'm this kind of person, but I'm behaving this way in these situations. But I feel authentic in both. Like, how is that possible? Yeah, because we have so many different components to ourselves. And this Piscean rising, absorbing everything is just, yeah, wow, huge. What a realization. I love it. So tell us about how you grew up. You alluded a little bit to it, but just kind of give us a little bit of an origin story. Where'd you grow up? What was your life like as a kid? And maybe how has that sort of impacted how you see the world today?
I'm the middle child of a family of 5 kids, and my parents, they moved around a lot in mostly the same county. I grew up in Utah County in Utah. And so like that kind of shift of change and stuff, I feel like the idea of change I handle a lot more than my husband. We live in Morgan now and he's lived in this town most of his life. He's lived 2 other places and then his like this is his home. This is where he lives. And so it's interesting because I handle the idea of change a lot better. Like I like it, but when it comes, I'm like, whoa, wait a minute. And he doesn't handle the idea of change, but once it gets here, he's like, he just buckles down and he gets through it and gets it done kind of idea. But yeah, so I'm used to like moving around a lot and change. There was a lot of conflict with my parents. They didn't their marriage was hard for both of them. Was a very very challenging relationship for both of them. So I feel like some of that has shaped me, like I mentioned before, like being able to feel the energy of other people and being perceptive of what's a little bit more perceptive than of what's going on. It's made it so that some of boundaries, like work and home boundaries, when I did get a career where I was very adamant about those because I had a mom that everything bled together, all of the boundaries of work and home and kids and all of this stuff. It was always just so bound together. So I'm here to talk about infertility, but I do have a daughter, and that does make my growing up has make me like think I want to do different, I want to do better. It's been a challenge to doing that because all of these things, no one will teach you better than your spouse or your child of things that you need to work on or who you could become better or pointing out weaknesses. And so with that, I feel like those things that growing up in a house that was full of constant conflict and tension has created me to seek out ways to find peace and healing so that I can have that in my home so that I can have those things different as an adult.
I love this. I love it when people are conscious enough in childhood or even later and look back on childhood and go, that's not how I want to do things. How can I do things the way that I feel is in integrity with me? And that's just the core of all kinds of conscious parenting. Like people say conscious parenting is this, conscious parenting is that, but it's really looking back at your own childhood and going, what would I do differently? And what can I take away that I do like and not just perpetuate the same cycle because I'm not paying attention. And you took that moment to say, this is what I want. So tell us about your infertility journey. Start us from the beginning. You have the floor. Tell us what you want to share.
So it's interesting because I feel like infertility plays a little bit into this. So like I said, I grew up in Utah and like around and in a predominant religion that expected a lot of as far as this is kind of the pattern that has been set out, the plan and expected to follow. There wasn't like a lot of question in that. There wasn't like this is how you do things. And as I grew up and went to out of state for school, not very far, just Idaho, there was still similar culture with that, but I kind of grew into myself a little bit more and have didn't follow those exact protocol or pattern. And so I was 35 when I got married. Most people in this religion, maybe not so much now, but 10 years ago even or 20 years ago when I would have been 25, then that was the expected. I should have been married. I should have been having kids. And so there was that also where I wasn't feeling that great level of support. So I had not followed that pattern. Then when I got married at 35, I recognized that that's not super young. And doing some research and things too, 35 is about when fertility rates or chances of having kids, healthy kids, start to decline a little. So when we got married, we didn't necessarily want to get pregnant right off the bat. So I did start some birth control, but I was only on that for like 4 months because it made me crazy. That was a crazy time of my life though, too. We had gotten engaged. I knew my husband for 7 years, by the way, and then I moved back to Utah. I was in Utah almost a year, and then we got engaged, and then 3 weeks later, my mom passed away, and that was in April, then we got married in June, and then my dad got married in July. So there was a lot of emotions, and being on this birth control made it so that I was crazy, 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 and I had, like, some things going on that I was like, "What is going on?" And I thought, "Oh, it's just because I've just had all of these big things happen in my life. It couldn't be the birth control." Then I
Sure.
started having physical side effects, and the doctors were like, "I don't know." I called the doctor's office. They're like, "That can't be happening. We've never had that happen before." I'm like, "Really? It says on the package here
What were
that
those, if you don't mind sharing?
just some vaginal itching." And so I'm like, "Oh, do I have a yeast infection?" Like I went even before we were married, and I thought, "Crap, this is not good." Like who wants to have a yeast infection on their honeymoon? Nobody.
Right.
So, like, they were like, "Oh, yeah, we'll just take this medication." It wasn't. It was the birth control. Like, the test came back negative for yeast infection and stuff, and so, I just stopped taking it because I was in 4 months, and I stopped taking it, and things just got so much better in my
Wow.
life. At that time, I was like, the itching stopped, and I felt some kind of level of emotional stability come back, so that was great. I regret those 4 months, but there's not nice thing to learn. We decided after that, though, that we should probably start trying if we were going to have kids because I was 35 and then I had turned 36 because I got married in June and my birthday is in October 6th. So after going off the birth control, maybe a month or two after that, I saw my OB, went through this series of things with him, and he was like, "Oh, you're still young. You can have a baby." He acted like, "Why am I worried about this?" And inside, I just knew. It's like I knew. I remember telling my husband before we got engaged, if we're going to get married and you want to have kids, we probably should do that soon because I'm not getting any younger. Like, just in case you're wondering, like I said, we've known each other 7 years. So I'm like, it's probably time. But so we did that and he put me on medication that made me crazy also. And I just thought, in fact, he upped the dose and I was like, I don't know if my marriage is gonna survive this increase of dose that you're putting me on. So we did that for a few months. Nothing happened. After that, I ended up going to a fertility clinic and a series of tests. All the while, I just felt so unsupported, not really getting answers. This fertility clinic did all sorts of tests, kept telling me it's normal. Everything's normal. My husband was tested. It's normal. Everything is normal. You're fine. It's normal. Everything is
Wow.
normal. And I'm like, it can't be because we're not getting pregnant. Like it can't
Yeah.
be normal. Like you're saying. And they're like, "Well, here's some more medication," that again made me crazy. And my husband like calls them Clomid instead of Clomid and Crymara instead of Femara because of how my emotions were and everything. And you're asking, "Why am I on this medication?" "Oh, we just put everyone on it." Like there was no actually any real answers. And then we went to another fertility clinic and he was like, "Oh, it's just because your age." And I'm like, "Oh, great." So I'm getting punished. Like it was such a struggle to get any real, what we felt like was real help. And as I've talked to other women too that have her fertility stuff, like this is such a time that is so trying. Like you can feel alone, you and your spouse, like especially when you're not getting answers. My husband is such a sweetheart and wants to take responsibility for everything. And as I've studied a little bit more about feminine and masculine energy, that's kind of their role, is to make sure that their woman is happy, right? So he's taking all this responsibility on him, and we don't even know that it's his physical issue. And I'm thinking it's got to be me because I have had issues my whole time of menstruating, like super bad cramps. Like it just progressed. I started when I was 12 into teenage years. I was taking at least 4 Advil every 3 to 4 hours. Now I'm like, oh, that certainly wasn't great for my liver. I didn't know any better, and we'd go to the doctor, and all they wanna do is put me on birth control, and my mom's like, "You are not going on birth control." Thank goodness, I'm really glad that she had the wisdom in that, and so I've just it's just something I've struggled with that whole like, my reproductive organs is something I've struggled with my whole life. So when he's trying to take responsibility of it, I'm like, "Wait a minute." So then you're kind of into this island of like, whose fault is it? It's like we're blaming ourselves instead, thank goodness, instead of each other. But there's some shame and aloneness and things that go along with that, and not getting the support that you need. I remember going to the first clinic and them taking blood, and for some reason, the phlebotomist couldn't get blood from me, and so I think I got stabbed 5 or 6 times trying to pull blood, and I ended up with bruises on both my arms. Till infertility isn't something anybody talks about, right? It's kind of hush hush because you feel like I've been told my whole life this is what you do. So then now I'm not able to do those things. I'm already kind of an anomaly because I got married at 35 and told all sorts of things before I got married that like, oh well, if you have enough faith, this will happen, or all of these things.
So did you start to doubt your faith, like your ability to like good enoughness in your faith or any of that
Yeah,
as a part of this? Like,
kind of.
I'm screwing up. I'm the problem, not only physically but also spiritually.
Yeah,
Does that feel like it?
what am I doing wrong? And I would try to take things into my own hands. Like so much of it was like, if we don't do this, this won't happen. And if we don't do this, I don't know if it was so much like now I look back and for sure there's like worth that definitely was questioned because it bleeds into so many areas. Like, why do they get to do it and I don't? Not and having not been married until I was 35, there were so many times in that journey that I was like, what am I doing wrong? I mean, I had conversations with God with both times that were like, if this isn't going to happen for me, why don't you help me accept it and move on with my life? Why do I have to go through this? Like, and when I went through it before I was married and then going through, same thing, different name
Yeah.
with the infertility, I was like, I've already done this. Like, why are we doing this again? What did I not learn the first time? But then I was like, what is going on here? Like, just felt alone, so alone and abandoned.
Yeah.
So,
That makes a lot of sense. Makes a lot of sense that you would feel that way. I'm curious, what sign and house is your Chiron in? Because this sounds like some kind of a Chiron theme.
it actually is. It's in the second house
Mm.
in Taurus.
Yeah, double whammy right
Yeah.
there. Self-worth, self-worth.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes. And so for sure, always this idea of worth kept coming up, kept coming up.
Where did you find, if any, during that time, did you find anywhere that brought you solace, that brought you support, that brought you a glimmer of hope, that brought you relief? What were you reaching for as a way to deal with that situation?
So even though sometimes I feel my relationship with God and Heavenly Father is very important to me, even though there's times that I'm like, what are you doing? what what the heck is happening right now? Even though I'm like go to all the places that felt like it was hurting me, I would still go to church and I would try to find some people to talk to because I feel like talking about it was super helpful. That is the one thing, like I said, a lot of times we feel stuff like this. If we feel like we're broken or we're the only ones going through it, we don't want to talk to anybody about it. And there is such healing in talking to somebody. So if I felt like I could trust someone, but it was always like, don't tell anyone, please don't tell anybody about this. I just don't want anyone to know because I just had this sense of pride about me that I didn't want. Like I did plenty of self-shaming. I didn't need other people's like pity or shameful glances or any of that. Not that I was doing anything shameful. That wasn't true. But so if I felt like I trusted somebody, I could kind of talk to them about it. So I did have a couple of friends. I had some coworkers that I could talk to a little bit about it. And they were all counselors though. So I worked at a school. So I talked to counselors. So we counseled each other.
So they were definitely safe people to talk to, which is wonderful. You felt like you had safe people in your
Yes.
life.
Yes,
Wonderful.
some of them, like that specific school, when I started there, there were 2 other single women that worked there with me that were counselors. And so even though they weren't going through infertility, I felt like they got it. They understood that like I'm doing something different. Like we're doing different than the status quo. Like that's fine. So it felt like I had someone there. I tried to find safe people to talk to and then keep going with my faith. There are a few times I had really strong impressions that we were waiting on a little girl to come to us. And I was trying to figure out how that was going to happen because that was after we had given up on the fertility treatments. Then we went the
How many years was this that you were doing the
very
fertility
short,
treatments?
like probably 2 or 3 years, but it's like they would make small mistakes and there was a huge lack of empathy and information. So I already didn't like doctors. I have a hard time with that already, and I didn't at that point, I didn't like it very much. Now it's not that I don't like them, I just feel like they're helpful for certain things and not helpful for other things. But at the time, it was like, well, I didn't have any other options. I didn't know what I was into. I hadn't done foot zoning yet. I hadn't done any of the energy training that I've done. That was it. My world was medical and counselor oriented. So it wasn't I didn't know I had other options, so that's where I was headed, but we didn't get a lot of support. What like I said, it was very short. Some of it was because, the money issue. It's so expensive. Like, insurances won't cover, treatment. They will cover diagnosis, so any test that we did, they were getting covered, but then when they wanted to do any kind of, level of treatment, insurances don't cover that.
Wow. Do you mind sharing how much you think you spent in total on treatment?
We we didn't because my husband had a hard time spending money. He's like, "We just don't even have the money to spend." Like, so we kind of tried we didn't even get to where it was IVF in the first clinic because they were like, "Just push a medication." They were telling me to do all of these things with ovulation tests, and ovulation tests weren't really working. I
Mm,
couldn't figure out whether I was or I wasn't ovulation and trying to get help from them. It was like they just didn't care, and I just it didn't it felt like we were going in circles even in the preliminary parts, I guess, where it was just like, "Here,
wow.
have this medication," and like I said, I ended up with bruises on my arms, went to work, felt like I was looking like a drug addict. I was so self-conscious about these bruises and felt horrible. I'm like, "Oh, I hope nobody sees me." Like, just so we didn't last long. Like, my endurance there was not like, it was not long, but then when we went to the second clinic, they had all the testing from the first, and we're like, "Let's do IVF." So then my husband says it's like we sat down with a used car salesman because at first they were like, "Oh, it's only gonna be 11 or 12,000." Or was it 17? I can't remember, to retrieve the eggs. So it was
Yeah.
like, "Oh, okay." And I'm thinking, "Well, we can probably do that." And then all of a sudden it was like, "And then your meds are gonna be another 3 or 4,000, and then to put it in, it's gonna be this much." So, like, walking out the door by that time, it was like $25 at least, like, minimum walking
Yeah.
out the door. I mean, that was 10 years ago, so or 8 years ago. I mean, now it's way different
For one
in
attempt,
for
though.
what? Yeah, they go in and retrieve the eggs, then you can freeze the eggs, and then after that, they can attempt to put some more in. But now I think my husband had a lot of wisdom. At the time, he's like, "I just keep getting the feeling that if we do this, it's not gonna take. It won't stay in your womb, like, it's just not gonna take." And the numbers suggested that if you looked at the stats and stuff with my age and things, it suggested that. And so we didn't stick around in the infertility clinic realm for very long. It was a matter of 2 years from starting with my OB to going to the second fertility clinic. And again, just not empathy. Like, my husband got mad because I was doing these tests that hurt so bad. And they're like, "Why does that hurt?" Like, "Have you not done this before? What's going on?" So, "Oh, do you have painful periods?" "Yes." "Oh, that might be why this hurts so bad." Like,
Wow.
are you kidding me? Like, just again, no empathy or support. So I don't know if that answers your question. I don't know what it was.
I really wanted so for any women who are going through this or families who are going through this, I really wanted them to see the nitty-gritty details of what other people are experiencing. Because if you come on here and you go, "Yeah, it was tough," that'll help one flavor of that. But a whole nother flavor is like, it's grueling. It was 2 to 3 years is, quote, "short," but it's also a long time to be questioning, "Is this working? Am I okay? Is there something wrong with me? What else is wrong? Maybe I'm not cut out for," like, all of these things going through your mind take split seconds, and to do that for 2 to 3 years and then have no empathy and all of this stuff added on top of each other. I just first of all, I feel for you. And second of all, I want anybody who's listening to know, like, this is reality. This is how it can happen, and it's not easy, and it's common to second guess yourself and ask yourself, like, "Am I crazy this whole time?" What was a turning point for you in this journey that you experienced?
So I feel like there was a few turning points. One was a couple years in after we had done the clinic and all of that stuff. I had a friend that said, "Why don't you go to this lady that does energy work?" And I had no idea, no clue what that was. And I just thought, I can't do one more thing. I can't do one more thing. Like it's too hard. And so I told my husband, because my friend had actually seen her for some other issues that she had had, not infertility, but she's like, "I think she can help you with this infertility problem." So, and that's another reason why talking to other people is so helpful is so then they can say, "Hey, you should do this," or, whatever it is. But so I told my husband I wanted to try it, but it was only because I wanted to work on other things. By this point, I was pretty depressed because remember before all of the events that had happened when we got married and then we jumped right into all of this stuff. So I was like, I'm kind of a mess. I need something else. So I went to her and she actually helped me with a lot of things in my relationship with my mom who had just passed a couple years ago and the grieving process. I was so stuck in grief that I didn't feel like I could move forward. And I kind of knew that, but I didn't realize to the extreme until I went to see her and she helped me move things out. And I was like, this is miraculous. So after a few times, I saw her for a little bit on and off when I needed. I did a little bit of counseling that helped me get on top of whatever the depression and other things that were happening, really like gloom and doom kind of energy. And I started looking at the energy work and it was a lot like counseling. And I thought, I want to do this. I want to learn how to do this. So I talked to the lady I'd been seeing. Her name's Danielle Knight. I don't know if she does energy work anymore, but she was wonderful. She told me to go do foot zoning because she's like, well, you're not a massage therapist. You don't have the right licenses to do exactly what I'm doing, but go do this foot zoning class. It teaches energy work and stuff. I didn't even know what it was. I feel like I just told my husband, I want to do this. And he's like, okay, if you want to do it, it makes you happy, go for it. He's always been so wonderful with stuff like that. So I just did the foot zonings. Anyway, in the class, I've met a few foot zoning instructors that are like, we're going to make it happen for you, the infertility and stuff like that. Well, they did and they didn't because I've never actually been pregnant. I've never birthed a child, but through that class, I was able to process through some things relationship based, things I was holding on to in regards to how I viewed a traditional family or how I viewed chores of a woman or femininity or a lot of those things. That's kind of where some of that processing through those things, that journey started. And then during that course, I had a family member suggest maybe some things with an adoption or trying IVF stuff again. And because of the details of that, for whatever reason, I felt emotionally like I had snapped and that I couldn't carry that weight anymore. I remember like that was a really bad day. The next day after I had had this conversation with her, I ended up rear-ending somebody because I shouldn't have been driving. In fact, I was going home from work because I felt like emotionally I wasn't sound and couldn't do that day. And so I'm like, I just have to get home. I shouldn't be driving because I was such an emotional wreck. Then I ended up running into someone. But anyway, after all of that happened, I felt like that was so heavy and so big. I took it to Heavenly Father and I just said, I'm done. I'm done. I'm done. I can't do this anymore. I'm done. So if this is something that you want to have happen, you're going to have to do it. I can't do this anymore. I'm done trying. And that was in
Wow.
February or March. August, my sister-in-law said, hey, my friend is looking for a family to adopt her baby. It's a little girl.
Wow. So when you cleared the energetic stuff that was preventing you from having a family, it happened. It happened without you trying. You surrendered. You were like, I'm done trying. I'm not doing this anymore. If it's going to happen, it's going to happen. And then 6 months later, there you go.
Yes, full faith in the universe. So God of things coming together the way they needed to. Now, I I love that part of our story because it was very healing to me to even have her come. And my little girl is amazing. Definitely meant for our family. But there's people out there who don't get to have that haven't had that experience. And even after we had her, I remember scrolling probably Facebook or something about somebody announcing that they were pregnant and that their baby was due. And I had this wave of grief just come over me. My little girl was only a few months old and I was so grateful, so grateful to have her. Like, I don't think my heart could be more full of gratitude. And then this wave of grief came over me, and I thought, it's okay. You can have both. It's okay. But not everyone's
Yes.
story is going to end with a beautiful adoption, and like, are so many miracles that happened after that. And I feel like the infertility journey is ongoing still. There's things about my body I still need to support and figure out. And I did find out after my daughter was born that I have endometriosis. A couple years after, I finally found a doctor that wasn't going to just push me,
Wow.
because the pain, I had pain that had changed, and my guess is that it grew more. I ended up with more tissue and scar tissue, and so in fact, some of the tests they did while I was pregnant said that my tubes were open, and when they did a surgery, I went in and did laparoscopic surgery 2 years ago, the tube wasn't open. But it took me, I mean, I was in my early 20s pacing at night because the pain was so bad, even after taking ibuprofen and anything I knew to do, up and down, pacing the apartment, couldn't do anything, didn't know what to do with my body. I hurt so bad. And, my early 20s and then my early 40s, finding out later that my insides are just full of scar tissue from the
And all of
endometriosis.
those years of fertility work and going to people who specialize in the female organs,
Yes.
no one thought to go, maybe it's endometriosis. No one did that kind of testing, or they couldn't find it because it was too small. What do you think?
I think I didn't have the classic symptoms. Well, let me reframe that. I didn't have all of the classic symptoms. And so, um, I do remember one time, like, Dr. Google helped me with, like, one. Found it once and couldn't find it again. That talked about having pain when you work out, and
Mm.
I have that. Like, I can't push my body too far or I cramp up. Like, I had a running partner ditch me after a while because I couldn't push myself farther because it hurt so bad.
Wow.
She wanted me to go longer. I could. It was the intensity. Like, it felt like menstrual cramps while I was working out. And I found that one time somewhere, and all of the other symptoms that come, that every time I would look it up and think, maybe I have this, maybe this is what's going on. Even as a teenager, when they tried to put me on birth control at the doctor's, my mom said no. And she would say, I wonder if you've got endometriosis. But no one would do anything about it.
Yeah.
And I'm like, how does she even know about that? I don't know. I don't know how she even came up with that diagnosis anyway. And even the surgery, they said the scar tissue was so thick 2 years ago that they couldn't biopsy it to say for sure it was endometriosis. They just said it
Wow.
looked like it.
Wow.
But you're right. All these fertility clinics, all this stuff, it made me grateful we didn't spend all that money because it wouldn't have worked. And
Right.
we wouldn't have our little girl if we did, if it had worked. So anyway, it's nuts. It's nuts how things go. So I don't know, anyone who's listening to this, really, if you have things in your intuition, you follow that, because, I kept thinking I need to find a doctor that will actually say maybe it's endometriosis. But like I said, my pain changed a few years ago, and I went through 3 or 4 doctors that just wanted to put me on birth control and didn't actually wanna figure out what was going on. So, then I finally found one, and I told her, I said, "You're not putting me on birth control. I need to know what's actually happening." And so she was like, "Oh, okay." And she was wonderful to work with.
Right.
She asked me how much of something I would take, like, "Do you take iron?" "Yes." "How much?" I was like, "Oh, I muscle test." And she goes, "Oh, okay." And I thought she's gonna think I'm nuts. So she goes, "Oh, I do the same thing." And I thought, "Who are you?"
Oh my gosh. It's so great when you find that magical practitioner that just shows up in your life and you're like, finally, finally.
Yes.
So she
Yeah.
diagnosed you with endometriosis.
I don't know if it's formally, but yeah, she's like,
Okay.
yeah." And then I think she asked, "Oh, are you constipated a lot? Are you like all these things that no one had thought to ask me?" And I was like, "Yes, yes, yes." She's like, "Yeah, that sounds like what's she got going on." And so I think the pain change had been it just growing more.
Yeah.
So
So before this, you talked to me about some energetic secondaries or correlations that you've seen with different female issues. And so I really want to hear about these energetic pieces of endometriosis and PCOS and whatever it is that you've seen, because you're a practitioner in so many ways that I'm sure you can see all these different correspondences that make sense with each other. Tell me about endometriosis and your energetic journey and what that meant for you.
so Endometriosis, I have learned, is about boundaries. It actually is the tissue growing outside of your bleed during that part of your cycle. You're bleeding outside of a boundary, right? The uterine lining is supposed to be inside the uterus and it grows outside. And then all of the tissue just kind of grows rampantly out of boundary. It's out of a boundary. So, and I was thinking about it more like it's an inflammatory disease. If your body has a lot of inflammation, then it causes your body to respond that way. Inflammation then would also be a boundary issue, right? And that's something that I'm continuously working on with my body is reducing the inflammation, trying to eat healthy. I'm miserable some of the time. Sometimes I'm really great. But that also demonstrates a boundary with myself. So with endometriosis, I've just learned to like stay in my lane and um so I've never thought about boundaries being a huge problem for me. However, when other people come into my lane, I let them, even if it's uncomfortable for me or I don't like it. And so one of the things that I've had to learn is how to have boundaries with other people and try to stick up for myself, whatever that looks like or however that is. I feel like the last year even I've had a lot of opportunities to have boundaries and to stick up for
Oh,
myself with other people. So that's been interesting. So that's one thing energetically with endometriosis is the boundaries, not just boundaries with other people, but one thing I've learned with some of the astrology courses I've took, Seidel Schultz is fantastic. I took some courses from her and she stresses a lot about yourself, this relationship with yourself. And with astrology, you know that that's kind of how it is. It's not the astrology isn't there. That's not someone else's chart, right? It's your chart. Everything in that is about you and what you need to learn and your relationship with yourself. So same with the energy stuff. It's all about the boundaries with yourself too. Again, I talked about like, nutrition and things. So what's my boundary with that? The other interesting thing about that is that my moon sign is in the first house with the Ceres and they're
wow.
conjunct. So I nourish and mother myself with a lot of my emotions. I'm really inclined to do that with my emotions and where my emotions are at. So boundaries as far as with my body and self kind of go to the wayside sometimes because of the emotional side of me. And so learning your emotional self and having your own emotional boundaries is part of the boundary issue, I guess, if you will.
Where your emotion flows, then your nutrients go there too.
Yeah.
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 So that's been super enlightening to learn from learning the astrology, but it's tricky to manage sometimes.
Do you seem to have more issues with boundaries with some people rather than others?
Yeah. Yes, and sometimes it depends on the relationship. Family, I noticed I have a harder time, and some of that is with my upbringing. It wasn't okay to have an opinion, and it wasn't okay, like, trying to talk to my mom about something that she did wrong or any kind of a situation. It was always there was no accountability, from her, no accountability, whatever. Um, I I didn't see boundaries in the right light because with her, I felt like she had no boundaries. I didn't see boundaries with her. She was kind of all over the place, and so I feel like I've worked hard to have boundaries, but then after I got married, I started noticing that there were some boundaries that were really hard for me to adhere to, because of other things, like other family members that pushed those boundaries. And bless my daughter, no matter how wonderful she is, she's a boundary pusher. Well, kids are, right?
Kids
Because
are, yeah.
they're looking for that, and so, like, sometimes I get triggered by the idea of other people not, like, keeping my boundaries, but that's not their job. My job is to enforce those boundaries.
Can you give an example of a boundary that you struggle with other people? I think this is such a great thing to talk about.
I'm trying to think. I think just even using kind words. I guess, like other family members using kind words or feeling like I'm not being heard, but mostly like using kind words and the tone or knowing how to talk to someone and just allowing someone else to talk to me a certain way that um that might be out of line or is not appropriate and learning how to say wait a minute here, that's probably not okay, or finding the right response. I tend to just retreat, right? That's what I learned when I was a kid was to stay out of the way.
You won't get in trouble if you're
Yes,
just not
yes,
there.
yes,
Yeah.
yes. Yeah, or some people have a lot of anxiety and they like to take control of the situation in every realm, and so I usually just let them do that because that makes them comfortable or it makes them happy. But there are times that it's not okay, like, for them to do that or to take control or, when you clearly said, "I would like this to happen," and then next thing you know, they are doing what they want to have happen instead. But I have learned with boundaries, it's not always about you telling them no. It's about saying what you are going to do or what you can do. Because you can't control the other person. There's no way. And so knowing when to say and when to say sometimes that's, I think, where it goes back to going back to a boundary for myself. That person is going to do that thing. So then what am I going to do? What
Yes.
is my boundary? So, there's been a few people I've had to step back from because I feel like maybe we just need a break from each other. Um, because of the communication with how they communicate or my lack of saying, actually, this is what I'm going to do. So,
For and expressing like, hey, that bothered me. I would really appreciate if you could say it a different way. Yeah, just expressing because sometimes people just don't have the feedback to be aware the way they're talking isn't okay. And then sometimes
right,
they get that feedback and go, I'm going to do this anyways. And you go, well, what am I going to do? Yeah, what am I going to do?
right, right.
Yeah. So, tell me about PCOS. What are the energetic signatures of PCOS?
PCOS is override of masculine energy. So you're more, more in that energy of masculine taking charge, lack of receiving. A lot of the time, the testosterone is really high in women who have PCOS. And so that's very telling of energetically where they are. If you have high testosterone, then your body's going to be the frequency that you're vibrating at is going to be at a higher masculine place. Kept having clients who their masculine and feminine energy were really off balance, and so I would always ask them, "How are you at receiving things? How are you at letting someone give you something?" And they always are like, "Are you kidding? No, I'm gonna do everything on my own. Like, I'm gonna do this myself," kind of thing. And again, the more I'm learning about feminine, masculine energy, the masculine, if you're married, your husband wants to actually do those things for you, but he's responding to your energy and just kind of staying out of the way, like letting you do it. So allowing yourself to receive or stepping back and not doing anything. In fact, I think one of the clients, I was like, you take things fine, but you need to stop giving so much.
Mm.
Which sounds terrible, right? Because I feel like we're conditioned, females, to give, 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 when in reality, when we're looking at feminine, masculine energy, the feminine is the one to receive.
Mm-hmm.
But we don't think that. We think, "Oh, no, I have to take care of," because of the nurturing and the caretaking idea. But you can still do that and receive, let the males in your life give to you. And usually that's if they haven't had a masculine person stand up and actually fill that energy. So then they have to do that. My husband and I have talked about this because he has a couple of single friends, and he's always like, "Do you know anybody we could set them up with?" So it's kind of funny, um, but we've talked about some of this, and I think females are better at being single than men are
Mm.
because females tend to step into that masculine role and take care of themselves, and then they can switch back into feminine if they need to take care of other people, or that care and nurturing side is often masked by that masculine energy. So we think that we're still being feminine, but we're not. We're just trying to be masculine. But I feel like females do better without that masculine person in their life than a man does because men want someone to take care of. That's kind of what they're here for. They want to be able to take care of.
Provide and protect.
Yeah. Yeah, they want that role, and if they're all by themselves, who do they have to do that for?
Yeah, absolutely. I saw a reel recently that spoke to that, and I was just like, that was too spot on with like the way that a lot of men are like, where what do I do? How do I handle life now? I don't know how to be saying like women don't are looking for me to fix them or make them feel good. What is it I'm looking for? Yeah, I think that you just nailed it on the head. As women are easier, it's easier for them to do both roles because we can turn the feminine roles into masculine roles and then still do the feminine stuff. But we're exhausted.
Mhm.
We're all
Yes.
exhausted.
Yes. Yes. It's not ideal by any means.
No. Oh my goodness. So, tell me about healing relationships with females and with other feminine relationships, and how does that come into play with reproductive health, with generally just feeling good about yourself, all those things, and how that changed you, and then how you see that in your clients.
So, before we found out that my daughter was going to be born, I went to um my first instructor for foot zoning who did energy work and stuff too. And I told her I wanted to be ready for this. And so we did a lot of clearing on what I thought traditional roles looked like, not necessarily traditional roles, but some of that stuff was that I felt personally that women were dumped on because it just my mom didn't ever seem happy, and growing up it felt like the boys always got to do everything and that I always was stuck home doing nothing. Like they did the sports, they did all of these things. Plus, I mean, I was a middle child, so that is very interesting with being a Libra sun, I think. So I was in the middle seeing all these things, and in my mind, so many things were just not fair. So then growing up in that perspective that I didn't realize until I was doing some work on myself of how much that affected me, this idea of fair, of like the housework needing to be fair and just a lot of things. And it's interesting with that idea. I'm glad that we cleared a lot of that unfairness out.
What was the new belief you brought in to that?
I wish I could remember, but I don't. I don't remember what it was,
Yeah.
at least in this session. And I think it was more that um, I remember thinking and feeling like it was okay. I didn't feel like it was so dumpy. Like being the mom, I didn't feel like it was a dumping ground after that. I had a poor relationship with my sister growing up, and so I had to clear some really negative energy around that I had towards her, and that kind of helped prepare me because with that, my sister was 4 years older than me. In a lot of ways, she tried to be my mother. I remember a few times my mom saying, "Leave her alone." Like, but you see that a lot with oldest children where they think they're the parent, or like my daughter will boss her dad around. I'm like, you are not the boss. So they're trying to find their place within an adult like world kind of within that system. And so it makes sense. But I think some of my negative views of mothering roles or even came from that relationship with her because she was so hovering and mothering. And I mean, I went to girls' camp with her and we did a craft and she did it for me. She wouldn't
Mhm.
let me just paint the wooden dolls, whatever it was, on my own. She was that much. I mean,
She
I
was a
was 12.
helicopter mom and
Yeah.
she was your sister.
But she was my sister. So, I mean, there was a lot of that kind of stuff that happened that we had to clear that out. And so I remember thinking that feeling like it was okay and that I didn't have the negative feelings towards her and that it was okay to fill that role. There was probably some traditional things that were okay and that I wasn't going to be the dumping ground and I could have boundaries and those things.
Great. So was most of the relationship stuff you cleared with your direct family, or was there also friend relationships that you need to do some clearing around or boundary setting around or anything like that?
Mostly family that I remember, and even still, like, I've had to clear some of that stuff moving forward just so that my daughter can have a better, connection with some feminine energy. I mean, it was what, a month or so ago, I did a reconnect with my mom on that, relationship or positive connection. So I feel like that's been as healthy as it's ever been, even though I started that, like, 8 years ago, something like that when with the first energy practitioner, but a lot of it really has been with healing feminine friends. Usually I just am like, "Oh, this isn't working for me." But yeah. I feel like if someone is a good friend or good relationship or worth having conversations and healing that, I will do that. If it's just one that it's like, if we're not that important in each other's lives right now, then it's not something that I continue to work on. But
Yeah.
I don't know. Maybe down the road I will because that probably needs to happen.
There's
Mostly
always
family.
something.
I
Yeah.
know, right? Let's think. It's a continued ongoing journey for sure.
I love it. What is one thing you want to leave everyone with today? One piece of wisdom.
If this is something that you are struggling with, there definitely is healing and peace available out there for you. And if you're have somebody that you know that is struggling with it, um, even though you haven't gone through it, understand that you probably have had the similar emotions somewhere through some experience that you've had. There's a lot of times I think if you haven't gone through infertility, you don't get it. You don't know. It's such a hard, um, agonizing experience. But if you haven't gone through it, you can still support and be a safe place for somebody to talk about it and understand and know that you have something to offer still, just because everyone has similar emotions of things. So that is definitely a way you can connect a little bit easier than worrying about the actual circumstance.
I love this. I love it. Talk about the things, be a safe space to talk about the things, and we can relate to each other more than we think, no matter what the story is. Yeah. Well, thank you so much, Candice, for being here. It was so nice to connect. And everyone, have a great week, and we will see you next time.
Thanks so much for listening. I hope you enjoyed this episode as much as we did. Please make sure to give us a 5-star rating wherever you are listening and share with someone you know. See you next week.